The story starts with the main character, Yuilin, being shocked that everyone has disappeared when he gets to school. He keeps looking in classrooms, the cafeteria, and the halls, but he doesn't see anyone. The bus stop is also empty. He thought it was a dream at first, but when he saw that the clock was stuck at 2:45, he realized it was a real nightmare. When an angel named Lita showed up, it confirmed his fear that he was being left behind again, just like he was every time when he was a child. Lita told them that everyone else had been sent to another dimension to prepare for the Great Cataclysm, which would happen when the Earth reached the next level to let the mana out. After that, an old record called Status will come into contact with the planet. It will be like a game for humans to figure out what the record is about. Lita also said that when the monsters are let loose on Earth, they won't be killed by nuclear missiles. Only mana will do it. All humans were sent to train in another world because of this, but Yuilin's skill at being sneaky made him hard to spot. When Yuilin started to react to the reaction, she told him that she would take care of him until the humans came back to Earth in 10 years. But Yuilin couldn't help but wonder what he would do for 10 years. Lita told him that even if he can't use mana, he should still prepare and train for the coming Great Cataclysm. Yuilin kept himself busy for 5 years by working out at the gym, while the other people were getting mana to fight monsters. Lita couldn't help but wonder why he kept doing the same exercises over and over again, especially since she was the only one who went with him. He worked out for a long time and got a great body. At the same time, his strength got a lot better because he never lost his focus. Lita went to see him once a week and made his meals so that he could keep doing what he was doing. Yuilin focused on martial arts training on the internet after his physical training, since the electricity and internet were still working even though time had stopped. Lita didn't want him to hurry through his training and make mistakes because he still had 5 years to go. When training was over, Lita wanted to spar with him to see how good he was, but she wasn't a weak opponent. Finally, the 10 years he wanted to pass quickly but steadily did so, and Lita thanked him for doing his best and taught him a few things about the cataclysm. Even though he was sad that he and Lita had to say goodbye, he was happy that he would see everyone again. But no one showed up, and none of them could guess how many more years it would be until the humans came back to Earth. After 50 years, Yuilin stopped waiting for everyone and spent his time training himself instead of waiting for them. Lita was scared about Yuilin because she thought he might give up, but he ended up finishing all the books and going all over the world. Lita never did anything else but ask God to bring the people back to Earth before he got too tired. When Yuilin was done reading books, he started learning how to butcher and blacksmith. He started with wild boars, and Lita was always surprised by how enthusiastic he was. Since he was left behind, he had been doing things like that for 274 years, but he had never given up hope. After he got good at butchering by cutting up a sperm whale without Lita's permission, he tried his hand at blacksmithing and found it to be the hardest thing he had ever done. When, after 5 years of hard work, he made a worn-out sword, Lita took it with her as a way to remember him. Yuilin had been making weapons for 50 years when he made every weapon that could be made in the world. It took him another 100 years to make the best spear in the world. He thought about making a new weapon when he realized that mana would bring new materials to people. Yuilin once again focused on martial arts without thinking about how much time had passed, while Lita worried about his mental health because it had been more than 1,000 years. After giving it some thought, she decided to teach him about relationships between people of different sexes. She saw it as God's will. When Lita finally got the courage to move, the sword that Yuilin had made began to glow and float in the air as she tried to catch it. Yuilin, on the other hand, changed back into the state she was in the day everyone disappeared from the Earth, which meant that the big disaster had finally started. Both of them were floating away from each other, and while Lita couldn't wait to tell him how he felt, Yuilin thought about meeting her again if he became a high-ranking being like her. Everyone came back to the same place they were in on the day they went missing. A status board appeared in front of Yuilin, which confirmed his guess that the Great Cataclysm was coming. For the others, it was like 10 years, but he was left behind for a total of 1,000 years. The strangest thing about him was that no one even looked at him. It was like they didn't know he was there. When he found out that his stealth skill was passive, he couldn't even turn it off to show himself. This made him very angry. When he got back home, it had been a long time since he had even thought about his mom. So, seeing her again was a good thing for him. After a long time, about 1,000 years, he could feel that the whole world was back to how it used to be. Yu-Ilin decided to hide the fact that he was left alone on Earth because he knew his parents would worry about him, and he wanted to keep people from getting suspicious. But he told them that he can't use mana when they were talking about making money from dead monsters. His parents didn't even blink because they didn't think it mattered if he knew how to use magic or not. Surprisingly, the spear he made showed up back in his room. He could use it to fight monsters while he started to learn everything that people from other worlds had uploaded. From the information he was able to find on the internet, he learned about the leveling system for humans who will fight monsters, and he also learned some things about the top dragons, called behemoths. Yu-Ilin was thinking about school when he said to himself in a quiet voice that he missed Lita. Suddenly, an angel named Eartha appeared on his windows and told him that she would teach him how to use magic, which felt like a déjà vu to him. Eartha told Yu-Ilin that he was sent from heaven because someone had asked for his help and safety. But Eartha was chosen instead of Lita because Lita and Yu-Ilin were getting too close as time went on. It looks like Lita tricked all of the angels to help Yu-Ilin, even though he could have learned the mana on his own. But since Eartha had already been sent on the mission, she agreed to do it because she really wanted to help him. She figured it wouldn't take him more than a year to learn how to use the mana, so she decided to stay with him until that time was up. Yu-Ilin felt like Eartha had invaded his personal space, but Eartha didn't waste much time calling him a lower being and making it clear that she doesn't care. As his life with Eartha got started, he went to school while she stayed on top of his head so no one else could see her. He saw that the government was getting the military ready because they knew the monsters were coming, but he didn't think it would work. Even when he didn't want it, Eartha thought his stealth skill was more useful than the other's strength because it made him invisible. He heard that a student at their university named Empress was well known in Lanparth for 10 years and showed off her skills in the other world. Eartha told him the basics about dungeons and how the only good way to train mana when monsters are still weak is to hunt them. Monsters that look like flies and bugs started showing up outside the university all of a sudden, which caught Ilin and Eartha's attention. Huge monster bugs drove everyone in the university crazy, and they kept blaming the government and the military before they all ran away. Our Yu-Ilin was left alone again, but instead of running away, he made plans to fight the monsters. Eartha could see that his body was bigger than most people's and that he could probably beat monsters below level 25 without much trouble. Even his craftsmanship was so good that he could make any kind of weapon out of things that were lying around, which doesn't match what Lita told everyone. Eartha told him that if he didn't want to say who he was, he could hide himself by putting on a mask. Our hero flew around and kept hitting the monsters with his hands. Each hit killed one monster at a time. During the fight, he gained experience that helped him level up, and his mana kept going up each time. The more he killed, the more they came after him, and when he fell, not even the mosquito's beak could hurt him because he had trained his body to the max. It just showed that his body has gone beyond what a normal person can do. When more monsters showed up, the Empress from Yu-Ilin's university used her mana to keep using lightning attacks to level up, just like Yu-Ilin did. Eartha didn't want him to get distracted and stop in the middle. When the military arrived, there was no one left to kill, so Yu-Ilin started killing the monsters to find the mana stones. Everyone was amazed by how good he was, and even the Empress asked him to help her with the killing. Just like a real businessman, Yu-Ilin negotiated his share of the deal before helping the unknown girl in front of him, who agreed to 40%. Everyone was talking about the skills of the Empress, but because our main character is so sneaky, they couldn't figure out much about him. When it was time for Yu-Ilin to leave, the lieutenant stopped him right away, but the Empress decided to teach him a lesson for stopping the mysterious hero. When Yu-Ilin went away from everyone's sight, he suddenly disappeared. Even though it helped him, this made him very sad. Yu-Ilin works on making armor out of the leftover parts of the monsters he was able to get before going back home. Eartha was getting more and more angry at Lita because she didn't tell the truth about what he could do. But he didn't know much about mana craft, so she started to tell him how it used mana crystals to make artifacts that can give armor and weapons special powers. Yu-Ilin was too eager to learn the mechanism, which showed Eartha how attached he was to him. Eartha then had to explain everything quickly to him. The more he learned, the more interested he became in everything, and the fact that he had less mana power than the others wasn't going to stop him from learning. Yu-Ilin got to work right away and used mana craft to make armor plates and boots. Eartha could tell that he had the ability to adapt because he understood the idea almost right away. Over time, he would gain really amazing power. When he only had one magic stone left, he tried a granting right away, even though Urtha told him not to because he still couldn't use mana like a scythed mantis. Urtha gave him a tiny bit of her mana to help him reach his goal in the last strand. She did this because she thought it would be a waste for him to fail. Uilin combined the ability of the mantis knife with his wrist protector when his mana craft reached level 2. This took a lot of hard work and the little bit of mana he had left. His skills were so good that he made the first artifact on the first try. This could have made him more interested in the subject, but instead he ran away from the park after breaking the swing. On that day, the news reported on the Empress and what he did in front of the university. His mother tried to stop him from going to the university because the government had called on people with more skills to protect the civilians from monsters. Uilin reassures his mother that he will leave the place if a monster shows up. He is surprised to see that his mother is worried about him. Urtha said that it might work as a mother penguin skill, and she might even be able to spy on her own son in the crowd if she ever sees him fighting with monsters. Uilin seemed more excited about meeting the Empress than about joining the government's side. Urtha was making fun of him, so he added that he doesn't even watch adult entertainment these days. This made her call him sterile because he couldn't do anything with Lita around him for 1,000 years. When the serious talk started, Urtha thought that his ability to process the shell of a monster without using mana was more interesting than Empress's. Urtha suddenly felt the presence of 70 wolves and wild dogs led by a level 35 diamond wolf. This shocked Uilin to death because it didn't fit with what she said. Even though Urtha wasn't trying to look worried the day before, she really did feel like time was running out, and Uilin could tell the difference between her and Lita. Urtha finally realized that the earth wasn't acting normally, which meant she might need his help. Urtha started right away to show Uilin the way to the place where the group of monsters lived. Even though God trained all of the people for the cataclysm, the calculation shows that the animals didn't change. But something went wrong, and the flow of time on Earth got all messed up. It took people 1,000 years to set foot on the planet. The reset of time didn't work well because animals that were only supposed to live for 10 years ended up living for 1,000 years and going through a big change. That only showed that the animals on Earth are much stronger than anyone could have imagined. Urtha told Uilin that heaven was trying to keep the balance, and that until it was done, he could get rid of the monsters and be rewarded for it. Uilin jumps into danger with the spear he made after 150 years of training and getting better at it. He did this because he knew the job would be hard for him. More people he killed made it hard for the civilians to go about their daily lives, and they failed miserably at using mana to protect themselves from the animals. Uilin stood up in front of all the people, hoping to protect them from the monsters that were ruining their normal lives. Eventually, he got to level 10, and the status board told him that he couldn't go any further until he chose a class on his own. But before he could do anything about it, the wolf monsters started charging at him in response to some kind of order. Knowing that fighting back was the only thing he could do, he stood up again with his spear and slashed through all the monsters while everyone kept looking at him like he was an angel sent from heaven to help them. But things got worse when one of the wolves held a civilian hostage under his feet and acted like it had done something similar before. But Uilin was too sure of himself to let go at that moment. That concludes part 1 of this recap. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. What will happen next? If you would like to see a part 2 of this manhwa, let us know in the comments section below. Till next time.